Okay. Today we're talking about Zev Gorem. We went some Pesach. And this is only part one of Zev Gorem for today. Rich Hashem next week or next time, we'll do more about Zev Gorem. And the general, to introduce it, the general rule is like this. If Isser is mixed into Heter, put treif food and selling kosher, then it's Batal B'Shishim. If there's 60 times as much, then it's not nice and tam, and it's mutter. But that assumes that it's not going to be nice and tam. What happens if the Isser is able to be nice and tam even with more than shishim? Then it's not batal. Okay, then it's not batal. And that was the beginning. That was what we did last time about Zev Gorem, about Davar HaMaimed, is that if a food has an Isser has an effect on the food, then it's also not batal b'shishim. So the different ways that something could not be batal. Like if it's again Davar HaMaimed, Avidel Taima, that's what I'm talking about now, like a flavor. It's nice. It's something that's very strong. It's a spice. It's nice and tam. Or a chazusa. There's all different things that are not batal b'shishim. So over here, the Ramah says, and it's other places as well, that we say that let's say Davar HaMaimed or any of them, but in this case, a Davar HaMaimed cannot be batal if it can't be batal. That assumes it's the only thing that's making the hamad happen. But what happens if there's Isser and Heter together? Okay, in for sure for the landers, it in the case of the Ramah, it's a cheese being made with non-kosher rennet. Okay, that's what's being made with. So if the rennet is treif, it's batal b'shishim, but it makes a hamada, so it can't be batal. What happens if you have a mix of kosher rennet and non-kosher rennet together? Then that's called Zev Gorem. They did it together. Both of them did it together, and because they did it together, therefore it can be batal. Okay, assuming of course it was batal b'shishim. Shishim, of course you have to have. But assuming it was batal b'shishim, and they did it together, then we say Zev Gorem, and they could be mutter. Okay, that's the general instruction of what it means to say Zev Gorem. Okay, so today we're going to talk about a specific application, which has to do with flavors. And the reason why we're talking about that is because, as a rule, Zev Gorem is only for cases of b'diavad. Okay, the simple explanation is that l'chatchila you can't do it. It's bitul of l'chatchila. If I put a little bit of treif rennet into my food or no savidah time into my food, you're not allowed to do that. So it's only to get the cases of b'diavad. And so, like in a house situation or in a factory, it would happen in cases of b'diavad. But for flavors is the thing that has the most relevance to us, and that's because what are flavors? What are flavors? Flavors are when a scientist, a chemist, goes together and he mixes all kinds of things together to create, either to mimic something that's there, like in the strawberry yogurt that he's eating. He wanted to make it taste like strawberry, so instead of putting in actual strawberries, he mixed all kinds of chemicals that give the same taste as berries or whatever that flavor is. Or he makes up a new flavor. Okay, make Pepsi has a different flavor. It's not mimicking something in nature, just trying whatever it is. Okay, so they mix all kinds of things, but you have to use many chemicals to make that, many components to make that flavor. So in a flavor, the question is going to be: is that Zev Gorem? Okay, would we say that some of the components are Heter and some are Isser, maybe Zev Gorem together, and that makes it to be considered somehow that would make it mutter, even if there's treif components. Since it takes, let's say, 10 things to make it into this, to make the strawberry, maybe that should be considered Zev Gorem. Okay, so we for foods have a luxury of telling people that you have to have hashgacha for your flavors, because they could have all kinds of chemicals in them. They could be not kosher, so you have to have hashgacha for them. Okay, but there's two applications of where people think about having flavors without hashgacha. One is, there are other countries where hashgacha is not as developed. There aren't as many Yidden and whatever reasons, and they have to eat food without knowing all the details. They can't get hashgacha and everything. So sometimes the only thing that's standing between them and eating a food is that it has a flavor in it. So should they be makbid? Should they care about the fact that there's a flavor in there? Could they say, it's always going to be Zev Gorem, it'll always be. There's many components. You think they're all treif? Only some of them are treif. And another example is for medicines. Lots of liquid medicines. Every liquid medicine has got a flavor in it. So in a medicine, there's not going to be hashgacha on it, and we have more of a pressing need for the person to use it because it's a medicine. So should we say, ignore the flavor because it's always Zev Gorem and it's going to be much because of it? Okay, so those are our applications that we're going to be thinking about. Okay, now today we're only talking about the Zev Gorem part of the flavors. is a completely different question about flavors. It has to do with Bitul timer. If you guys come back for some Tzadiches, when we get to there, we're going to talk about that. It's a completely different question. Is whether the components are considered Bitul timer. It's a completely different question. But for today, we're talking about just the Gorem part of it. Again, there's many components. Does that somehow make it okay? Okay. So in order to understand whether Gorem applies or not, we're going to talk about Gorem. We're going to talk about pratim of that din. But we're also going to talk about how you make flavors to help us understand them. Okay. So for that example, let's see if this one. Okay. This is an actual. What you see here on the screen is an actual flavor, strawberry flavor. I went to a company that we give hashgacha to, and I said to them, "Could you give me a flavor, a formula for making strawberry with the amounts?" Okay, the amounts that it would be. What I wrote here is the parts per million, which is how much would it be in the finished product, in the finished beverage or whatever food that's going to have this food in it.
Oh, in the food, not
in the food, right? Not in the flavor. They gave me the amount actually in the flavor. They gave me. I said, "Do me a favor. Give me a." Usually we don't get this, but give me one that has the actual amounts in it. But this is converted into the parts million in the finished product. Okay, so as you can see, there's tiny amounts of any of this stuff in the finished product. Okay, most tiny amounts of it. But when you make this flavor, when you make any flavor, what the flavorist, if you have to call him, does is he looks at the food. Let's say in this case a strawberry, and he detects lots of different things. He detects. There's a whole vocabulary for describing this. He detects green notes and acidic notes and sweet notes. They have a whole vocabulary to describe what they're tasting, which me and you don't taste any of this stuff. Okay, when we just bite into a strawberry, it just tastes like a strawberry. Okay, but they could detect all kinds of things that are going on in there, and then they recreate it. They say there's a top note, a top green note. I don't know what that means. What it means is that at one part of the eating of the food, you have a green taste, a green note at that point. So he puts in another chemical that has the same properties, that it also gives a top green note. Okay, and then there's a bottom.
And he tastes the strawberry. He tastes in the strawberry.
He tastes all those things. So I once was saved, but I was once at a class about this kind of stuff. And at one point, they had everybody come up and taste the food and describe what they were tasting. Okay, and the people, like, you wouldn't believe what they were tasting. What they were seeing in this grape juice was not to believe. What they could, I taste this and I taste this. And I, Baruch Hashem, said, the grape juice is not kosher. I don't have to do it. Instead of having to embarrass myself and stand there in front of it like a moron, like trying to. So these people, to them, they could taste all these things, and then they recreate it by putting so. So what will I put in that will give me that creamy note? I'm going to put in acetyl methylcarbonyl at this amount. Will give me that amount to it. Okay, so now part of it is they're recreating what they taste in the natural thing. But part of it is then they get their own ideas. And once they did the base of what it is,
they have proven their bunch on strawberry.
Correct. Well, they make it more unique. Okay, so make my strawberry to be different than the next guy's strawberry, so I get a little more of this or a little that or something unusual. They make it like that. Okay. So for our purposes, we're going to focus on the two main parts of what makes this into a strawberry flavor. These are a lot of pieces over here. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to talk about two parts. Okay, which I have actually in front of me. Okay, and they are maltol and cis-3-hexanol. Okay, these two different chemicals. These are the one. The maltol gives a sweet note, and cis-3-hexanol gives a green note. Okay, I don't know what to say now. Now, what the surprise to most people is that those two things have nothing to do with strawberries. Okay, and you could smell them yourself. I'm sorry, the Zoom people can't do it. Okay, this is maltol. Okay, maltol. Okay, it's supposed to taste. It's fair. It's supposed to taste. It's supposed to smell. Smell and taste is almost the same. Smell like cotton candy. Okay, that's maltol. And there's. And I don't wrong share. Okay. And that one is cis-3-hexanol. Okay, and it has a smell of freshly mowed grass or something like that. And that's why it's called green. Okay, green note. So the green and grass, like freshly grass. Okay, so two different, very different smells. Okay, whether you think that it tastes like cotton candy, smells like cotton candy or not, we could debate that part. But it doesn't taste like strawberry. It smells like strawberries b'chlal. Okay, but when you put them together, okay, the maltol is like cotton candy and the cis-3-hexanol is like freshly mowed grass, and if you put them together, it's like a strawberry. Okay. Would you believe it? No, you wouldn't believe it. Okay, this specific example, I once actually saw it in a flavor company. We went to learn about this, and they did this for us. They put the right amounts together, and each one we smelled separately, and they smelled like that things, and put them together, and it was a completely different taste. Okay? Now, we'll talk about one day down the road, that might only be considered to be, okay, but I'll put on something. Yeah. Okay, so now what would happen is, for what we're going to talk about is what would happen if the cis-3-hexanol was kosher and the maltol was not. Okay? Would we say that the strawberry that we made is zev Gorem because it has two different things in there? Neither one of them by themselves tastes like strawberry. Okay? Neither of those things taste like strawberry. But if we put them together, all of a sudden we have a strawberry taste to it. So now if the cis-3-hexanol was kosher, if the cis-3-hexanol was kosher but the maltol was not kosher, would we say that now it's zev Gorem because the strawberry taste that we got came from these two things together? Okay? So the first thing we have to think about is that over here, maybe it should not be zev Gorem because the two different things, they're giving two different things. They're participating in different ways. One's doing cotton candy and one's doing freshly mowed grass. So maybe that doesn't qualify for zev Gorem. Okay? Or what you say is, what's the difference? Lamaisa, together is what made the flavor. Okay? Together is what made the tom. So that question is a machlokes Rashi and Tosfos. Okay? What I just said to you is machlokes Rashi and Tosfos. Okay? One of the cases of zev Gorem in the Gemara is the case of arla. Okay? That something grew from arla, and arla is also banana. So you took something that was arla, and you now have something, a new tree came from that, and it's a machlokes, and now that's a question of is zev Gorem in that kind of a case. So Rashi learns that that case of zev Gorem is you took a seed of arla and you planted it in the ground. So the seed is arla, that's isser. The ground is heter. So what made the new tree grow was a mix of heter and isser. Seed and ground. Seed and ground together made it grow. That's zev Gorem, and therefore what grows afterwards is mutter. Okay, because zev Gorem is mutter. Therefore, what grows afterwards would be mutter. That's how Rashi learns. Tosfos says, no, that's not zev Gorem. He says because trees and seeds and ground are contributing two totally different things. What makes the tree grow, what the seed did and what the ground did, are two totally different contributions to make this thing grow out of this tree that grows afterwards. So Tosfos says it's talking about that you didn't take a seed, you took a branch from an arla tree and you put it onto another arla tree, onto another tree, and together you made now a tree grew out of it. So the trees are both give or take the same thing, and that counts as zev Gorem. Okay? But according to, but Rashi says, that, no, they don't have to contribute the same thing. They can contribute different things, and that will make it. So it means it says, according to Tosfos, this is not zev Gorem, because the two of them are giving totally different things. One is giving cotton candy, one's giving freshly mowed grass. Okay? So our isser and heter are giving two different things. And according to Rashi, it doesn't make a difference. As long as the finished product comes from two different places, that's good enough to be zev Gorem. So Tosfos following you.
I'm trying to do just a comparison.
Okay.
I mean, here you have two things. They're both flavors,
Mm-hmm.
both contributing flavors. They happen to be two different, and there are two different flavors, but they are accomplishing one goal for the.
And in the tree, we have a new tree because of this. So we could always see that they're always accomplishing more. That's the point of zev Gorem.
Yeah, but the ground and the seed are two different elements in the development of a tree.
Right. And so, I mean, it depends how you word this. We could say there's also two different elements. You know what I mean? So it's grass and cotton candy. There's two different things. Okay. So you're saying that it's not even tolling this. It's for sure okay. It's for sure it's zev Gorem. Okay. So the good news is not negated lamaisa because in Hilchos Arla we pass on like Rashi. Okay, we pass on like Rashi that even if it's two different things, it counts as it's considered zev Gorem. Okay, so because of that, so this would be from that perspective, this would be zev Gorem. The fact that it would come from two different things, you say it's the same thing. Flavor and flavor is the same thing.
It's not because self-regardless. We're not passing like Rashi to self-regardless.
No, pass on Rashi. No, I don't think so. We're just passing Rashi. Okay, but so.
But on the other hand, maybe even going to Rashi, it's still the us over here.
Okay, you're gonna win no matter what, right? Okay, yeah, that's why.
Because who said that was a Gorem? You're looking at a finished product. You have strawberry flavor, and he's saying that the strawberry flavor is you have cotton candy element and you have the green element. Maybe it's. And who said you could look at it as one flavor that's made by two components? Maybe it's you have cotton candy and you have green.
Half an hour ago, did you think that strawberry tastes like cotton candy, or you thought strawberry tastes like strawberry?
Strawberry.
You taste like strawberry. Like half an hour ago, that's what you thought. When you eat strawberry, when you have a strawberry flavor, that's what it tastes like. Because to you, it's a finished thing. That's what it is. You don't know from the chachmas of what made them. You know all this? Okay. Okay. Now you should know. We're not going to talk about it today. There's a machlokes in the achronim about what happens if they don't both contribute. One is the Gorem, and the other one just sets up the environment that makes it possible for it to happen. Okay, one of the examples is if you have sa'ar, if you have flour and you mix it with fruit juice, with mei peris, it doesn't become chametz. If you have mei peris with water, it becomes chametz. So the person can say the water doesn't do anything to the lechamietz, but the water makes the environment that allows the lechamietz to happen. Okay, it's the mei peris that causes the lechamietz, and the water is just creating an environment. Does that consider zev? We're not going to talk about that. And there's other things like that also. We're not going to. Other ways of two things combining. Not for today.
Okay, this is not that case.
This is not the case. No, they're both contributing. They're both. There are other things in a flavor that do other parts, like they make it mix well and things like that. Those are not included.
Taste ingredients.
Right. Those are not the tastings. Right. Those are bottled because they're not every time. They're nothing. They just play a side little role that's not enough. Okay. But the next thing we need to talk about is like this. A shaila of two different types in about when we say there's a rule called Yesh, bazeh, לחמץ. We're going to talk to you about that in a second. And the types in Pesach and types of avodah have different ways of understanding what cases like this. And what's going to be is like this. Types in Pesach say like this. If zev Gorem works if the Isser couldn't do what it had to do by itself. Okay? In our case of our cheese, if you put in so little rennet that it couldn't, of treif rennet to make the cheese, then the other rennet helped it out, the kosher rennet helped it out, then you say zev Gorem, it's mutter. Or if Tyson says in Pesachim, what happens if you put enough rennet of Isser and enough rennet of heter both in? Okay, they both could have done it, but when they did it together, that's also zev Gorem. Okay, the only case that's not zev Gorem according to Tyson Pesachim is what happens if you put in enough treif rennet to be mine with the cheese, but there was not enough kosher rennet to be mine with the cheese. That's the case when you can't say zev Gorem. Okay, and so that's the only case according to Tyson Pesachim that you can't say zev Gorem is when there's enough Isser to make the hamada or the tam or the chazrus or whatever it is, but there's not enough heter. In contrast, Taisus in Avodah Zarah says that the only time you can say zev Gorem is when there's not enough Isser to do the hamada or the Bitul time or whatever it is. But any time there's enough Isser to do it by itself, Yesh, bazeh, לחמץ is really a Mishnah, but he learns it. Yesh, bazeh, לחמץ is enough Isser to do the hamada or the Bitul time or whatever by itself. Then there's no zev Gorem because what's the logic? The logic is you didn't need the heter in order to do this. The Isser by itself could have done it. So it's not zev Gorem. It's not. The Tarsim Pesachim is saying is Lamais, the two of them together are doing the job. They're both doing the job together. So it's zev Gorem. And Tarsim Avodah Zarah is saying no. As if the Isser could have done it by itself, that's not zev Gorem. If the Isser could have done it by itself, it didn't need the heter. So the heter is doing nothing. The heter has no role over here. Okay, so it's not two things together. It's just the Isser doing it by itself. Okay, so the Taz says that it could be that the Ramah holds like Tosfos and Pesachim, but everybody says, including the Taz, that the din is like Tosfos and Avodah Zarah. That the only time we can say zev Gorem is when there's not enough Isser to make a difference. Okay? If the Isser by itself could have done it, had there been no heter, the Isser by itself could have done it, then in that case we say there's no zev Gorem. Okay, zev Gorem doesn't apply. So this din of Yesh, bazeh, לחמץ is very much again exactly to our case. Okay, because when I told you that we put in cistrihexanol and maltol into the flavor, the amount that's in there, the amount that's put into there is enough to, each one of them is enough to be nice and tam. Okay, there's enough cistrihexanol that I forgot which one that tastes like. You remind me. I don't remember which one. What?
It was the green.
The green. Okay, there's enough of that to make it taste like freshly mowed grass, and there's enough maltol for it to taste like bubble gum. So that means to say is if the maltol in our case was the Isser Okay, maltol is, if in our example, maltol was the isser, was the cotton candy. If we would have put in just the isser into this thing, I mean, we left the other flavor components out, we put in just that amount of parts per million into the thing, our cookie would taste like cotton candy. Okay, that would be the taste we would get. Now, we wanted the strawberry, so we put in other things also. But the amount of isser that was put in, the amount of flavor of each component that was in there, of each of the main components that are in there, is enough to be nice and tam by itself. So when we say an avidah time, it can't be bottled because you could taste it. We say, wait a second, but over here, you're only tasting it because there are many things. It's not true. The reason why you're tasting it is not because there's many things. You really taste all of them. But when there's all clumped together, you taste a bigger taste. You take a bigger taste that you call strawberry. But really, you're tasting every one of those things. Okay, and really, that's their goal, is you should taste every one of those things. Okay, to the simple folk like me and you, we just taste the big taste of strawberry. But the etzem, you're tasting all those things. And if you remember, I told you, that's how they did this in the first place. The way they made this in the first place was, they bit into a strawberry and said, I taste bubblegum. Okay, now to me and you don't dream of tasting bubblegum yet, but they did. So he said, okay, I have to make that much of a taste. Now, afterwards they adjusted and they added other chazarai, that's not a good word, they added other things in there, other things that make a difference to adjust the flavor and a little more and a little less. But the overall of the main components like this, that it's enough that it should be nice and down. So therefore, the reason why we can't say zev zagarm on the flavor components, as a rule, on flavor components is because on the main flavor components, each one of them is yesh lechamietz. Each one of them is enough in there that you should taste it. And therefore, doesn't qualify for zev zagarm. It's not, you don't need both of them together to make the taste. No, each one of them is being nice and tough.
Now, you don't see that, Heinz is just strawberry. Now they both put in as just strawberry.
So that's I didn't say before. It's a very interesting, it's a balmor. We'll talk about it when we get to Bitul time. That when you have something where you don't taste the isser itself anymore, you taste a new combination together, that's called Avidah time with Rabbanan. It is considered Avidah time, but Avidah time with Rabbanan. Avidah time with the rice is when you taste the actual isser itself. When you taste a new taste, because that's Avidah time with Rabbanan. It's Balmor. Yeah, Rav Shach likes to say it over.
I like all of it, but it's not such a...
It's from Balmor. I mean, he says it. It answers Kashrus. When we get to Avidah time, we'll talk about it. Okay, now, what I told you, I keep telling you the case, this is why I keep saying the case, is that the maltol, the cotton candy, is the Avidah time. It is the one that was treif. What would be if the case would be the opposite? Okay, if the cis-3 hexanol had been the treif. Now, the truth is neither of these are treif. But what happens if the cis-3 hexanol had been the treif one? Okay, if the cis-3 hexanol tastes like freshly mowed grass. So in that case, in that case, Rav Shach like this. He said, in that case, what would happen if you would taste just freshly mowed grass? Okay, imagine we made a cookie that tasted not like cotton candy, but tastes like freshly mowed grass, because that would be nostam of gum. Okay, that would be giving a negative taste into the food. If you gave cotton candy taste, that's within reason that could be a positive taste. But had it been giving just the freshly mowed grass, and we had put just a green note into this thing, it would taste awful. Okay, nobody would want to eat food that tasted like that. So what would be the thing in that case? If that had been just here by itself, it would be batal barayv. That would be motor also. We wouldn't consider that to be an avidah time. We would say the cis-3 hexanol, if that would have been treif, if that would have been the only component that was treif, it would be batal because it was batal barayv, because it's there's town of gum. So had that been the treif one, then the flavor would be mutter. Okay, the flavor would be mutter. But if the component that's in there is a component that you taste, which usually it is, you taste it all the way through, and it's something that gives a positive taste, which often it is, but not necessarily, but often it is, that's when we wouldn't be able to say zev zagarm. Okay, but if it doesn't give a positive taste, it gives a negative, again, had the cis-3 hexanol been being nice and town, then it would have been mutter. Okay, now, another example where we take...
So then it shouldn't be able to be called zev zagarm
because
it's not counted anymore. If let's say if the maltol is usher and the
cis-3 hexanol
is mutter, so then you're telling me, if you're saying that that's batal, so then you should only count the maltol.
And if the maltol was the treif of the kosher.
It's treif.
Right, so it's bottle. No, the maltol is not bottle. It's the only thing that's here. So it's not zev zagarm.
Right. Oh, that's what you're saying.
So I'm saying, you're another step. You're saying ignore. Now we can ignore the cis-3 hexanol. That's even more so. That's just the maltol. But I was saying it's not zev zagarm because since we taste cotton candy all the way through, it's nice. It doesn't need zev zagarm to be nice and tough. Now,
we would only do this by clearly nice and common things,
right? Right.
We don't start saying this. It's very hard to.
No, but and this is an example of that. Is because the stuff is such awful. Nobody wants to eat food that tastes like grass. So that's why it's now. Another case where we would be able to say zev zagarm was like this. So this is a case that came up not even so long ago here. And that was like this. Somebody was making a butter flavor, and the butter flavor had 3 things that contributed towards the buttery part. There were lots of other ingredients that did other parts to make it taste good, okay? But they were trying to make a butter flavor, and these are the 3 parts that contribute towards the butter flavor, okay? And of the 3 of them, the butter oil was milchig. Butter oil comes from butter. That's milchigs. And the other 2, decanoic acid and butyric acid, both of which give a buttery type taste. Okay, these are very similar tastes. Those are both power. Okay, now in this case, the question wasn't that whether we should call this powerful milchigs. Of course, we were going to call it milchigs because it had a milchig ingredient. That wasn't the question. The question is about the kalim. Okay, the question was, this was being made on kalim that were going to be then used for power afterwards, and did we have the kasher? So the question was, is if this is milchigs, if the product is milchigs, I'm not whether we call it, whether we label it with this D on it. So if it's actually milchigs, then we can't have to be kasher. Okay, that was the question for there. So when we looked into it, it turned out that the amounts of butter oil and the other ingredients it was a very dramatic difference. Okay, it turned out that there was 10 times as much butyric acid as butter oil and 20 times as much as decanoic acid in the product. Which is to say what was giving the butter flavor over here was the butyric acid. Okay? That's what was making it have a butter flavor. There wasn't enough butter oil in this thing to get any time to it. Okay? Now, why are they putting it in if it's not giving any time? And the reason why they're putting it in had nothing to do with time. It has to do with they could be able to say on the product, contains butter. Okay? They want to be able to write on the packaging, contains butter. So by putting in some butter oil, a tiny bit, it makes no difference, doesn't make any difference to the time of the food, but just like it contains butter, or contains real butter, or something like that. And therefore, so they put in almost like a spoonful of nothing of that to make this flavor. So in that case, it's not going to be Yesh, lechamietz. Okay, there's not enough here to make a difference. Okay, the butter oil is making no difference in the finished product. Would not make a difference in the food that we're making, and therefore it would be zev. Now again, we wouldn't call this milk parv. We wouldn't tell somebody this is called parv. The shayla also kalim of it. That was good enough.
Okay, now the dinner would be better.
What do you say?
But the dinner would be better.
Right. That's something. Since dinner really is parv, therefore we don't have to kasher our kalim. It would be bitul lechamietz for us to let them call it parv. We wouldn't put in butter oil and call it parv. That would be like a form of bitul lechamietz.
Are we doing time asas kalim?
Yes. Yeah? Yes. So that was actually getting right to what I was getting to, which is we've been talking about whether zev zagorem should play a role in the flavor. As I said at the beginning, when we get to the din of bitul taima, we're going to talk about whether that makes a difference in kasher and kalim also. Okay, there's other parts of the shiloh flavors. You won't heard today one part of the shiloh flavor is should zev zagorem apply. That's one part of the shiloh. There's a whole another part of the shiloh, which is how it affects kalim and other parts of details of bitul taima. Because in fact, we don't kasher kalim if something is just a straight flavor. Okay, that happens to be that's the truth. But what that has to do with the second part. Okay, again for siman tzavishas. Now. Okay, so to summarize before I go on to the last part, which has to do with Pesach, in order to say for a flavor that should be qualified as zev zagorem, you really have to get into the details, or as they say, get into the weeds of what's going on in the flavor. But the derech klal, if you don't know enough of the din, or you don't know enough of the mitzias, you assume that zev zagorem does not apply to these things. Now, our last thing we have to talk about is Pesach. Okay, we've been talking about treif until now, and now a different question about Pesach, and that goes like this. The Ran says that the way zev zagorem works is essentially it's bitul. Zev zagorem muter matam l'fishin esbatel isa beheter. Okay, it's a type of a bitul to say is the isser and the heter are together making the food taste the way it does, or having the hamada, or whatever it is that it did, and therefore it's a type of a bitul. So the Magen Avraham says, well, if it's a type of bitul, then we know there's a din that on Pesach chametz is also b'mashu. Chametz is not batul, and since chametz is not when it happens on Pesach, it can't be batul. So im kain, then zev zagorem is not going to be mutter on Pesach. Okay, zev zagorem would mutter from Isser. Zev zagorem is mutter if it happens before Pesach.
Zev zagorem starts off with bitul. You don't have bitul, you don't have anything. You have to start off with bitul. Let's push it before you can get to anything. That's the background. And then you can talk about it. Maybe it's worse because it's a bitul time. But if you don't have bitul, you don't have bitul.
That's a good question. You're saying the Isser is here and made a difference. So the Isser is here. So even if a tiny bit fell into it,
yes, it's also b'mashu.
I don't know the answer to the question. It's a good question. I have to think about that. I don't know. I know the Magen Avraham says this, and you'll hear more. Everybody else has lots to say about it as well. It's a good question. He's saying is, well, my say it fell in, so that's enough to make it lesser. Okay, that's a good question. I don't know.
Well, you have a case of Zevzeh Gorem that's not a case of Bitul. The case of the Rashi and Tais by Arlo.
Right, your case, but not in Pesach. We're talking about in Chametz. How could it be? What's the Chametz going to make a difference? There are cases. You said it's by Arlo. There's other cases that makes it that it could be Zevzeh Gorem without it. Okay, I don't know. It's a good question.
You also use Chametz for fuel or something as a fuel to bake something.
So we didn't talk about that b'chlal. There's a different thing called Yesh eitzim pas. With Zevzeh Gorem doesn't apply to that. That's not a good case. That doesn't apply to Pesach. Okay, that's a different thing. Okay, that's an angle of Zevzeh Gorem which we completely didn't talk about. Okay, so I don't really answer your question. Okay, but anyhow, so the Magen Avraham says since it works with Bitul, okay, so because the case we're going to talk about, you'll see why it doesn't apply. Okay, that's the answer. I guess the answer to your question. I don't know what the Magen Avrahm's case was, what he was talking about, but the case we're going to talk about is going to be an answer to your question. But you're reminding me also. Okay, so the Magen Avraham says it doesn't work. Okay, but many other Achronim, the Chayadam and the Gra and others all say no. When the Ran says that it works at Bitul, he didn't really mean that. Okay, he didn't really mean that. He really meant is that when the Zevzeh Gorem, it's as if there's no Isser B'chlal, as if there's no Isser at all. The way in Ramosha, the way he says it is Nefshav Lein Dinav Kilu Einai V'Haverat Kigorem Hanot Status. Zevzeh Gorem means is it's as if it's an indirect hana. It's like not even there. The thing is not there. It's not because it's bubble. It's not really bubble. It's like it completely ignores it. It doesn't exist at all. Okay. And when Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah bring this, they say that most of the poskim don't agree with the Magen Avraham. But lemaisa lechatchila, a person should be makbid for that. That's what they say. Now this whole thing that I'm talking to you about is not. It's not to negate. As a rule, it's not to negate us because food that we eat that's made on Pesach, I guess it could be negated in your house. I guess it could be such a thing. But food that we eat that we buy in the store was all made before Pesach. Okay, nobody's making Pesach food on Pesach. All the food that we eat is made before Pesach. Before Pesach, there's no shilas of Issa Mashu. So you want to have a medicine that has a little ingredient in it, that was made way before Pesach. Or you have a food that was made, any things like this would be shilas from before Pesach. So this Magen Avraham, as a rule, wouldn't apply. But where it would apply, what it would be negated to, is two cases. Same case. And that is if you want to eat fresh eggs or fresh milk on Pesach, and the cow or the chickens ate chametz on Pesach. Okay? So in that case, which answers your thing from before, but that's still not the case I'm going to talking about, but it answers your case, which is the cow ate chametz, okay, and then it gave milk. So what should we say is this milk is a result of the cow eating chametz. Okay, now it's a result of 100 other things also. Okay, the cow ate all the foods. The cow's got a whole body full of the cow that helps produce the milk. But there's a little piece of the chametz that had to do with it. And chametz, if Zevzeh Gorem doesn't work on Pesach, then we would say is that the milk that comes out of here, or the egg that comes out of this chicken, is coming from chametz.
It's a achila and the Isser Hana.
It has to do with Isser Hana over here. Here it has to do with Isser Hana, not the Isser Achila. But the same, Zevzeh Gorem doesn't have to only do with Achila. It's anything. Okay, so the if so, according to this Magen Avraham,
that's why my question doesn't apply.
Right, that's why in this case your question doesn't apply, because it's not negated to Issa Mashu of a person eating it. It's not there, so to speak. There's no grain in your milk, but it's okay. So the from this side, what the Mishmur said you should be from this in one simon. When the Mishmur said you should be makbid for this Magen Avraham at least the chatchila, then you would not eat it. Okay, but in a different simon where the Mishmur talks about milk on Pesach, they're not in the same place. There's other parts of the shiloh about eating milk. It's not so clear that the cow that ate chametz and the milk that came out of it are connected to each other. Okay, there's all the other parts of the shiloh. We talked about it one year before Pesach. And there, the Mishnah brings 2 days. Can you drink milk from a cow that ate chametz on Pesach? He brings 2 days. He's not machloek. He just brings 2 days about whether you should do that. Because there are whole other parts of the shiloh of what you should do. And maybe you have to wait 24 hours. And the Chayadim and Ramosha say to completely ignore that, then don't worry about it. B'chlal, again, not because of the current angles of it, but all the parts of it. They say completely, it's a fine, you can eat whatever you want to. So it's a separate child. I'm just mentioning for the Zevzeh Gorem part of it, that's an example of maybe this Magen Avraham to be makbid because of Zevzeh Gorem. And just if I'm mentioning milk already, we always tell people that they should not eat milk that was that they buy that's not kosher Pesach or that they bought on Pesach, and that's because of a side little angle. That's because they add vitamins into milk, or they put they do washing with the eggs. They add the vitamins, and there's a little chance that those vitamins would be chametz. And since
You're talking about it's not kosher Pesach.
if it's not kosher Pesach, it's not kosher Pesach, and you buy it on Pesach, so then that milk could have been made yesterday. And if I buy the milk on Monday, they could have milked that cow on Sunday or a day or two before on Pesach. In which case, if they add the vitamins, which will chametz, then there's an isamashu because they added a little bit of vitamins into my thing. If there's chametz in there, then it would be asa b'masha. That's why I tell people to either buy the milk before Pesach or buy kosher Pesach, because kosher Pesach is, first of all, they make sure the vitamins are kosher Pesach, and they make it before Pesach. They don't make it on Pesach anyhow. So that was used for that. Okay, this is the end of today. There's a whole other sections of Zev Gorem, many more pages here to go. That's for next time, Rosh Hashem, if you guys are still there.